Emma sat at a small corner table in the bustling cafe, her hands resting lightly on her rounded belly as she tried to calm the fluttering in her chest. The hum of conversations and clinking cups seemed distant as her eyes found Daniel across the room, focused on his laptop, fingers tapping lightly on the keyboard. She rehearsed her words quietly, feeling the weight of what she was about to ask, knowing that it could shift everything. The moment felt delicate, suspended, as if the air itself held its breath. Daniel looked up just as Emma's gaze lingered on him, a mixture of curiosity and hesitation in her eyes. He offered a polite smile, though his body remained tense with caution. The cafe's chaos continued around them, baristas calling out orders, steam rising from freshly brewed coffee, but in that bubble between them time seemed to slow. Daniel noticed the subtle way she rubbed her stomach, a gentle, protective gesture, and something stirred in him, a flicker of empathy for a stranger whose life was about to change so profoundly. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emma's voice broke the quiet between the surrounding chatter, soft yet firm. Daniel blinked, surprised by the directness, then nodded slowly. "Of course, if you want to," he replied, his voice steady, careful not to reveal his own sudden intrigue. He closed the laptop slightly, giving her his attention, sensing that this question was more than casual curiosity. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line, her anxiety mixing with a faint smile as she realized he was listening without judgment. The cafe scene gave way to flashes of Daniel's routine, glimpses of the life that had built the walls around him. He dropped Sophie off at school that morning, waving at her little hand with a practiced cheerfulness that masked the fatigue underneath. Emails and deadlines waited at his office, and the day promised little in the way of respite. Yet as he returned to his laptop, he thought of the woman in the cafe, her presence lingering in the corners of his mind like an unfinished melody that refused to let go. Emma fidgeted with her coffee cup, the liquid growing cold as she wrestled with whether to continue the conversation. She had always been cautious, careful not to overstep. Yet something about Daniel's calm attention gave her the courage to speak. She glanced at her belly, imagining the months ahead with the baby she would soon bring into the world, and then back at him, wondering if sharing pieces of herself would make her seem vulnerable or merely human. The risk of opening up felt enormous, yet necessary. Daniel observed her quietly, noting the subtle tension in her shoulders, the slight furrow in her brow. He saw someone balancing fear and strength, much like he had to do daily, managing responsibilities that seemed to multiply with every passing hour. In that moment, he realized the connection forming was fragile but significant. It was not romance yet, nor even friendship. It was recognition of another human navigating life's uncertainty, and it demanded a gentle attention that neither of them could ignore. The cafe's rhythm continued around them, yet it seemed almost secondary to the small space they had carved between the noise. Emma's question hung in the air, unspoken layers beneath it waiting to be discovered. Daniel found himself curious, a rare feeling in the monotony of his routines, and he wondered what life had brought her to this moment, to this question, in this exact place. He sensed that this encounter, brief as it might seem, could alter trajectories in ways neither of them could yet predict. As Emma finally exhaled, releasing some of her tension, Daniel offered a reassuring smile. It was a small gesture, but it carried unspoken acknowledgement, a silent agreement to explore what lay beyond that simple question. Their eyes met again, and for a fleeting moment, the bustling cafe faded entirely. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the connection forming in the corner of that room, a connection that would ripple forward, threading their lives together in ways both subtle and profound, setting the stage for the story that was only beginning to unfold. Emma returned to the cafe the next morning, unsure if Daniel would be there, but hoping for the comfort of a familiar face. She carried her coffee carefully, her belly already showing more clearly with each passing week. The bustling room felt less intimidating this time, as if she was stepping into a small, private world carved out by their previous encounter. Daniel looked up and offered a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that he remembered her, and that simple gesture eased the nervous knot in her chest. They began to talk in tentative rhythms, sharing snippets of life that didn't usually leave the walls of their own experiences. Emma spoke about her pregnancy, the sleepless nights, the unexpected cravings, the quiet moments of fear she tried to hide from the world. Daniel listened intently, occasionally nodding, letting her words settle in the space between them, understanding more than she could know. The conversation was not heavy, but each word carried weight, a subtle trust forming as their lives slowly entwined. Some days, I feel like I'm carrying the whole world in my stomach, and no one really sees it, Emma confessed one morning, tracing the rim of her cup with a trembling finger. Daniel's gaze softened, and he shifted slightly closer, his voice gentle, almost confessional. I know that feeling, raising Sophie alone. People think I've got it all under control, but it's hard. There was no judgment, no pity, only recognition of shared struggle, and in that recognition, a bond began to form. Their meetings became moments of reprieve from the pressures of their separate lives. Spilled coffee led to laughter, awkward pauses gave way to candid confessions, and small gestures, a shared pastry, a door held open, became acts of understanding. In these seemingly mundane interactions, they discovered comfort and relief, a reminder that vulnerability could connect two strangers in profound ways. Each encounter deepened the trust, slowly building a bridge between their worlds. Emma started to reveal more, cautiously at first, about her anxieties regarding motherhood, the fear of raising a child alone, and the uncertainty that clung to her days. Daniel shared similar truths about his own life. Missed opportunities, the weight of responsibility, and the loneliness of making decisions that affected not just him, but Sophie. Their openness was deliberate, a subtle dance of giving and receiving without overstepping, allowing their relationship to grow organically through understanding rather than spectacle. Outside the cafe, the city moved in a blur of motion and noise, but inside, time seemed to stretch and fold around their conversations. The aroma of coffee and baked goods blended with the warmth of their growing connection. Even the casual observers, baristas, other patrons, could sense the unusual attention they gave one another. A quiet gravity that wasn't romantic yet, but intimate in the most human way. It was a shared space of emotional safety, a place where they could simply exist together without expectation. There were moments when silence spoke louder than words, a pause after a shared story or a soft chuckle at a trivial joke. Emma felt lighter after these interactions, as if the simple act of being seen and heard made her burdens more manageable. Daniel, too, discovered an unexpected relief in sharing his experiences with someone who understood, someone who didn't judge him for exhaustion or imperfection. Each meeting reinforced the subtle yet undeniable bond that was growing between them, built on honesty and empathy. By the end of the week, the cafe had become more than a place for coffee. It was a meeting ground for two lives intersecting at a fragile but promising point. Emma and Daniel left each encounter with a sense of anticipation, a small excitement tempered by caution, knowing that life outside these walls was still challenging and unpredictable. Yet, they also carried with them the comfort of having someone who could understand, someone who could share their burdens, and in that comfort, the foundation of something lasting and profound began to take shape. Their meetings began to spill beyond the confines of the cafe, unfolding into walks through tree-lined parks where the crisp air mingled with Emma's laughter. Daniel carried Sophie's little backpack, adjusting straps and making sure she didn't lag behind, while Emma, balancing her growing belly, smiled at the ease with which he navigated both child and conversation. The rhythm of these weekends became comforting, the city's noise receding as their small trio found pockets of peace together. Emma marveled quietly at Daniel's dedication, watching how he handled Sophie's endless questions, scraped knees, and boundless energy. It was a form of discipline tempered by warmth, and it revealed layers of care that Emma hadn't expected in someone so reserved. Each gesture, no matter how small, spoke volumes about his priorities and values, drawing her admiration and slowly dissolving any lingering hesitation she had about opening up further. Daniel, in turn, observed Emma with a mixture of surprise and respect. Her humor softened tense moments, her patience steadied the unpredictable, and her courage, despite her condition, shone through in ways he found quietly remarkable. In their shared errands, grocery stores, pharmacies, or stopping for ice cream, he noticed the way she handled minor frustrations with grace, making him silently acknowledge that her strength was not performative, but deeply genuine. "You've got this, even when it doesn't feel like it," Daniel said one afternoon as Emma paused to catch her breath after a long walk, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. She smiled, a mixture of gratitude and reassurance, replying softly, "And you've got a little team that counts on you every day." The simplicity of the exchange carried weight, embedding layers of trust and mutual recognition between them. Their bond grew in subtle gestures, each one unspoken but understood. Daniel's hand brushed against hers to steady her when the sidewalk tilted, Emma instinctively adjusting Sophie's coat as he juggled bags, and shared jokes that sparked laughter from the little girl who adored their dynamic. It was intimacy without urgency, a connection forged through care, observation, and mutual respect rather than overt declarations of affection. Even quiet dinners together at small diners became exercises in understanding and empathy. Conversations drifted from mundane topics, weekend chores, favorite childhood memories, to reflections on fear and hope. Emma found herself revealing anxieties about motherhood she had never voiced aloud, and Daniel shared fleeting regrets about moments missed with Sophie. The act of sharing, of being heard without judgment, deepened the emotional resonance between them. As days turned into weeks, these shared experiences created a rhythm, a comfortable pattern that neither could ignore. Sophie's laughter became a soundtrack to their afternoons, and the ease with which Emma and Daniel coordinated, supported, and anticipated one another's needs spoke to an emerging synergy. It was not love yet, but the building blocks were unmistakable: trust, empathy, and subtle, consistent presence in each other's lives. Walking home one late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the quiet streets, Emma felt a calm she hadn't known in months. Daniel's arm brushed hers briefly as they passed Sophie skipping ahead, and in that simple gesture, a quiet understanding passed between them. They both sensed that what had begun as chance meetings was slowly turning into something meaningful, fragile yet undeniable, carrying with it the promise of connection and the unspoken question of what might come next. At night, when Emma lay in bed, the weight of the day pressed down on her. The conversations with Daniel replayed in her mind, the gentle touch of his hand, the quiet moments shared between them. She wanted to believe in the possibility of something more, but a part of her hesitated. With a baby on the way and a life already complicated, could she really open herself to someone else? Was it fair to drag him into the chaos of her world, to risk complicating his life further? The questions lingered long after she closed her eyes. At work, Daniel struggled to focus. His thoughts wandered to Emma, to her laugh, to the way she seemed to understand him without words. But in his quieter moments, the fear crept in. He had spent so long putting his energy into Sophie's needs, building a life that was just the two of them. Could he really add someone else into the mix? His heart had been bruised in the past, and the thought of trusting someone again seemed both comforting and terrifying. He couldn't shake the doubt that if things went wrong, Sophie would feel the consequences the most. Emma sat at her kitchen table the next morning, her hands shaking as she sipped her coffee. She wanted to tell Daniel how she felt, how deeply she appreciated the bond they were forming, but fear kept her quiet. The baby was due soon, and everything would change again. She couldn't ignore the practical side of life. She couldn't forget the loneliness that had defined her days before meeting him, or the reality of raising a child alone. She didn't want to complicate his life. She picked up her phone, staring at the message she had started to send him. I don't want to complicate your life. Ooh, the words felt heavy, but true. She put the phone down with a sigh, unsure of what to do next. How could she offer him something so uncertain? Wasn't it better to protect him from her mess? Maybe the distance between them was the safest place to be. But then, why did the thought of that distance hurt so much? Daniel, on the other hand, paced around his living room as he tried to process the pull he felt toward Emma. He had seen the way she looked at him, the way they connected over shared moments, and yet he held back. He had failed before, in relationships and in life, and the scars from those mistakes were still fresh. Sophie was everything to him. He couldn't afford to make another wrong choice. But what if this was different? What if he was standing at the edge of something that could change everything for all the right reasons? He reached for his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen. Life's complicated already, he thought, as if the universe had whispered that in his ear. Maybe he was meant to face it, face all of it, with someone who understood the complexities of it. He typed back a simple message. Maybe we don't have to make it worse, or maybe we can face it together. He hit send, feeling both relieved and terrified at once. Emma stared at his message when it came through, the words stirring a mix of hope and doubt inside her. What did that mean? Could they really navigate the chaos together? Her emotions swirled, fear, excitement, the longing for something real, and the practical voice that urged her to stay guarded. She knew that this wasn't just about her anymore. She wasn't alone in this, and yet she feared what it would cost them both. As the days passed, the silence between them stretched, neither knowing how to close the gap. Emma found herself drawn to the idea of them facing the future together, but every step forward was weighed down by the fear of failure, of letting someone else down again. Daniel, for his part, found himself asking the same questions. Was it too soon? Was he opening his heart to the right person? Or was this just another risk that could end in heartbreak? Both knew the stakes were higher now, much higher than they had ever anticipated. Emma doubled over suddenly in the kitchen, a sharp pain shooting through her belly that stole her breath. She gasped, clutching the countertop as the world spun around her and panic flared in her chest. Daniel, who'd been sorting Sophie's school bag nearby, rushed to her side, his face pale but focused. "Emma, what's wrong? Can you walk?" His voice carried urgency but also calm, a steady anchor in the chaos of the moment. She shook her head, words failing her as another wave of pain hit. Daniel didn't hesitate. He guided her carefully to the car, supporting her weight, careful with every step. Her mind raced. Fear, the baby, the unknown. But in the blur of adrenaline, there was relief in the fact that he was there, that he hadn't questioned or judged her. He simply acted, and that simplicity gave her a small, fragile sense of security amidst the terror. The drive to the hospital was tense, each red light stretching time like elastic. Emma gripped Daniel's hand tightly, feeling the pulse of reassurance beneath his fingers. Outside, the city blurred into streaks of light and motion, but inside the car, Their world had contracted into a narrow corridor of focus, worry and unspoken trust. Daniel's voice broke the silence occasionally, calm and practical. "Almost there. You're doing fine. Just a little longer." Sophie sat at home, fidgeting with her hands, eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. Her small heart raced as she imagined her mother in pain, alone. She had watched Daniel care for her in so many ways, but this moment, this unknown danger, made her realize just how much he mattered, how much they all mattered to one another. The bond between them, forged in shared routines and quiet moments, suddenly felt urgent and vital. Inside the emergency room, Emma was wheeled quickly to triage while Daniel stayed close, speaking softly and keeping his hand over hers. "You're not alone in this. Not now, not ever," he said, his words steady and unwavering. Emma clung to him, feeling a release of tension in the form of tears she hadn't realized she was holding back. "Thank you for being here," she whispered, the words barely audible but carrying the weight of everything they had shared. The medical team moved efficiently, checking vitals and monitoring contractions. While Daniel remained a constant presence, Emma's fear eased slightly with each reassuring glance, each gentle squeeze of his hand. She realized in that moment that support wasn't just about solving a problem, it was about presence, about showing up fully when it mattered most. Their bond, fragile and growing, was cemented in trust and reliability, tangible in every small action. Hours later, when the initial panic had passed and the doctors confirmed everything was stable, they sat together on a quiet bench outside the hospital. Sophie arrived soon after, holding a small bouquet of flowers she had picked herself. Emma smiled weakly, feeling the warmth of their little unit, realizing that in moments of crisis, what mattered most wasn't perfection or control, but connection and shared resilience. As they walked home under the evening sky, the city lights casting long reflections across wet sidewalks, Emma leaned against Daniel's shoulder. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a quiet clarity. They meant more to each other than either had fully admitted before. The shared fear, the urgent care, and the relief had created an unspoken promise of presence, a reassurance that neither would face life's challenges alone, and that something stronger had begun to take hold between them. Emma sat on the worn couch in Daniel's living room, Sophie quietly coloring at the coffee table nearby. The soft hum of the city outside contrasted sharply with the weight pressing on Emma's chest. She had spent years carrying fear like armor, shielding herself from disappointment and loss. Now, facing Daniel, she felt the walls around her heart trembling, unsure if they would hold or crumble. "I've always been scared of being alone with everything on my shoulders," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel listened, his eyes tracing the subtle lines of worry across her face. He understood the fatigue behind her words, the vulnerability that rarely showed in public. He had spent years burying his own regrets, moments missed with Sophie, and relationships that ended before they could grow. Each memory carried a pang of guilt that never fully healed. "Me too. But maybe that's why we can do this together," he said softly, his hand brushing hers in quiet reassurance. The room felt heavy with honesty, the kind of openness that could either strengthen a bond or shatter it entirely. Emma thought of the baby growing within her, the life she was about to bring into a world she couldn't control. Sharing her fears didn't make her weaker, it made her real. And Daniel, seeing her like this, felt the same. Their histories, though filled with mistakes and regrets, suddenly seemed less like burdens and more like foundations for understanding. She spoke of her anxieties about motherhood, the nights she had spent imagining sleepless hours, and the fear of doing it alone. Daniel shared fragmented memories of Sophie's first words he had missed, the birthdays he had been too late for, and the quiet guilt that lingered in every photo untouched on his phone. The conversation wove a tapestry of past pain and present care, each revelation softening defenses, each confession a step closer to genuine connection. Emma's gaze wandered to Sophie, whose innocence and laughter filled the room with light. "I don't want him to grow up seeing me struggle without help," she admitted, her voice catching. Daniel's heart tightened at the truth of her words. He had always feared failing Sophie, but seeing Emma share her vulnerability awakened something stronger, a desire to protect, to nurture, to stand together. The weight of the past began to feel less oppressive, as if it could finally be shared rather than carried alone. Daniel reached for a blanket and draped it over Emma's shoulders, a small gesture that carried reassurance far beyond its simplicity. "We can't change the past," he said softly, "but we can choose how we move forward, together." His words were steady, grounding, and Emma felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. The possibility of a shared future, once distant and abstract, now seemed tangible, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a long night. They sat in silence for a few moments, letting the weight of their truths settle between them. It wasn't romantic yet, not in a conventional sense, but it was real, raw, and profoundly human. Each had faced loss and failure, yet here they were, finding courage not in perfection, but in the willingness to show up for one another. The walls around their hearts had begun to crumble, replaced by a fragile but promising foundation of trust and mutual understanding. As the evening deepened, the city lights casting a warm glow through the window, Emma and Daniel both sensed a subtle shift. The past, with all its mistakes and fears, no longer held power over them alone. They had begun to envision a life not dictated by regrets, but shaped by choice, empathy, and shared resilience. And though the road ahead was uncertain, for the first time in a long time, it felt like they might be ready to face it together. Emma wandered through the baby aisle, her fingers brushing over tiny clothes, soft blankets, and miniature shoes, while Daniel stayed close, carefully lifting items and showing her choices. Sophie darted between them, her laughter echoing through the store as she pointed out her favorite colors and patterns. In the gentle rhythm of selecting tiny socks and hats, Emma felt a quiet warmth settle over her chest, a realization that what had begun as convenience had grown into genuine care, trust, and a subtle alignment of hearts. Each shared glance and light touch reinforced the bond forming between them, one rooted in patience, respect, and the quiet understanding that they were creating something together, even without promises or certainty. Daniel handed her a tiny onesie, his hand lingering briefly on hers, and smiled softly. "We don't need everything figured out, just need to be here step by step," he said, his voice calm and steady. Emma returned his smile, a sense of relief and hope washing over her. "Step by step, I like that," she replied, letting herself imagine a future where they navigated challenges side by side. In that simple exchange, with Sophie's laughter around them and the soft hum of the store in the background, they felt a turning point, a quiet but powerful recognition that they could face whatever came next together, allowing hope and connection to bloom naturally. The evening air was cool and calm as Emma and Daniel strolled down quiet streets, Sophie skipping ahead and turning to show them small discoveries along the way. Emma's hand rested lightly on her belly, and Daniel leaned closer, feeling the subtle kicks of the baby beneath her clothing. Laughter bubbled between them, soft and unforced, mingling with the distant sounds of the city. Months of uncertainty, fear, and hesitation seemed to dissolve in the warmth of this ordinary moment, replaced by trust, shared joy, and the anticipation of what lay ahead. Every glance, every smile, carried the weight of the bond they had nurtured together, solid and tender. Emma rested her head briefly against Daniel's shoulder, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "I'm glad I asked that question months ago," she said, the memory of that first moment still vivid in her mind. Daniel smiled, his hand brushing hers as he replied, "Me too. Best question ever." The three of them continued walking, their steps slow and unhurried, savoring the quiet intimacy of family in its simplest form. The night stretched before them, open and promising, leaving space for laughter, challenges, and growth, a gentle reminder that the future was theirs to shape together, step by step.